So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be here. So, just to give you a little bit more context, I'm Tania Diggory. I'm the founder and director of a mental health and wellbeing training organization called Calmer. We specialize in supporting entrepreneurs, freelancers, and business teams to nurture good mental health and well-being. We do this primarily through workplace training courses, events, digital products, and webinars like this. And what we do is we are a prevention-based company. That's what we specialize in. So we can signpost people to clinical or medical support as and when needed. But what we do is we're here to try and empower people to recognize those early signs and symptoms when you're struggling with stress, potentially feeling burnt out, and when you might need that help and support to bounce back from adversity. So we help professionals like yourselves to prevent burnout from escalating. And I really also feel that the context around good mental health, positive mental health, what does it mean to look after and nurture your mental well-being, doesn't get enough airtime when we think about it. A lot of the awareness that's raised around mental health these days, in particular when you think of media stories that you hear about and read, is still a strong emphasis on poor mental health issues, problems, and struggles. Now, of course, it's critically important to understand what that looks like, what those signs and symptoms are, and how you can get the right kind of help and support for you if you need. It's a big part of what we educate at Calmer. At the same time, we also believe that it's important to counterbalance this discussion with looking at what good mental health looks like. How do you look after and nurture and support your mental health? And that kind of language, I believe, will help contribute to releasing the stigma that's still associated with mental health. It is still a huge issue in terms of people struggling with their mental health. In particular, entrepreneurs have, a lot of different business hats that we're wearing, right? A lot of the time. We're navigating a lot of responsibilities in our lives on a daily basis. It can be very stressful, but at times, of course, very rewarding as well, which is why we do what we do, right? So I'd love to hear from you all who are joining today as well. Please just pop in the chat box. Let us know who you are, why you joined today if you want, but also, are you an entrepreneur? Do you run a startup? Do you manage a team? It'd be great to get a little bit of context around the people joining today. If you can just share anything in the chat box, that would be great. For now, I'll just give a little bit more of a backstory before I share a presentation with you. So I've run a business since 2010. Before running Calmer, I was running two different businesses in the dance industry, actually. And I was running a dance school and then an international dance events company. And during that time of juggling both businesses, I was working way too many hours. I wasn't really taking a break. I was working weekends, evenings, wasn't really listening to my body. Didn't really think about looking after my well-being at the time, but I was just so passionate and driven and focused in what I was doing. And I think that's easily a pitfall that many entrepreneurs can fall into and regularly do fall into, because you love what you do, passionate about it, and time can just be non-existent in some way. You just keep going and keep going. But eventually that started to take a toll on me. I was physically in pain because I was teaching a lot still, and I had an injury I wasn't tending to. I ended up, feeling really more and more stressed out. And if this led to burnout eventually, where I felt completely mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted, like a car running with no fuel. There's just nothing left to give. So at the time, I didn't really know that that's what I was going through. I didn't name or couldn't really name what it was that I was experiencing. I just knew that I felt really depleted in lots of different ways. And so I actually started experiencing a high level of anxiety as a result of that. And I struggled with panic attacks on and off for about a year. Sometimes lasting a really long period of time, on and off, half an hour, 45 minutes, and sometimes a short period of time of like a few seconds or a minute, and they would come and go in bursts. And it was really challenging to deal with, and especially the first time experiencing that, I had no idea what was happening. So it really was a big wake-up call to me at the time, in recognizing the importance of looking after your mental health, particularly as a professional and particularly as an entrepreneur, when you have so much pressure on your shoulders a lot of the time. So I learned as well that you can be the most positive and proactive person. It doesn't mean that you won't struggle with your mental health. And it's so important for us all to take stock of this and figure out, well, what do those signs and symptoms feel like? What does it look like if I am, stressed out, if I'm actually on the journey to burnout? What can I do to peel things back and look after myself? Because it's different for everyone. And it's important to recognize what that feels like for yourself, and what you need to do to feel better in yourself. So we all have mental health. This is a reality, just like we all have physical health and emotional health, etc. So we do need to nurture and look after it. So actually through that period of time, we're talking, around 2013, 14, experiencing that and being on a journey of recovery. Following that, it really inspired me to look into this in more detail. So I'd have people come to me who were entrepreneurs, freelancers, and they would come to me for mentoring, and I would hear them say similar things. I'm feeling depressed, I'm anxious, I'm burnt out, I have PTSD, but I'm just not talking about it. And, bearing in mind how far we've come just in the last few years around mental health awareness, we're talking 7-8 years ago at the moment. So, back then it just still really wasn't talked about that much. And it made me realize, another light bulb moment, I didn't really tell many people. I was very good at putting a big smile on my face and getting on with things, even though I had to take time out of my business for a while when I was burnt out. I just told a few people in my personal life, and I didn't really talk about it openly. And they're hearing these people and their stories as well. I suddenly thought, why aren't we talking about this? And so it really inspired me to set myself on a new trajectory, really. I ended up retraining and as an NLP practitioner, a mindfulness teacher, mental health trainer, and first aider. And I set up Calmer as a platform to support entrepreneurs, startups, and creatives with looking after their mental health and well-being. And in time, that has grown and escalated into supporting professionals within businesses, mostly small to medium businesses, and just professionals at large to look after themselves. So this definitely comes from a personal place of my own experience, but also witnessing experiences of others who have struggled as entrepreneurs and as professionals. And so this is a big reason of why I do what I do today and why I'm so passionate about it. So I've just seen a couple of comments in the chat box. Thank you, Jessica and Radu. So an entrepreneur running 2 businesses, good on you. I know what that feels like. Shadid and Parish, a hair brand, and JP Riverside, a leisure consultancy. Fabulous. And Radu, an entrepreneur from Europe running a startup. Great. Oh, we've got people tuning in from different parts of the world today. That's wonderful. So thank you for joining and for sharing your experiences with us. So I'm going to share a presentation with you shortly. And what I would say is if there are any questions that you have, just make note of them whilst I'm presenting. And then at the end, we're going to have an opportunity for Q&A as well. So, I'm here to support, I'm here to help you as much as I can and with the time that we have today. So what we're going to talk about, we're exploring mental wellbeing for entrepreneurs. The stats are continuing. There are so many that you can look into on the Mental Health Foundation website, and that's a really great resource, and the NHS website. But the reality is with businesses as well, it's costing organisations per year at the moment between 44 and 47 billion in working days lost, in sick days taken, in taking time off of work due to stress. And that's more than for any other sickness-related absence issue. And the reality is that when workplaces, startups, invest in mental health and well-being, resources and support and interventions, they do see a return on that investment massively. You have an increase in loyalty and retention of staff. You have increased productivity, increased happiness, more connection as a team. People really appreciate being valued. It's these basic human needs that are so important. We all appreciate the need to feel understood, to feel appreciated, to feel valued, to feel listened to, and we all have different needs. So those need to be addressed in whatever business setup that you're working in, whether you're a solopreneur for now and you're looking in the future to slowly expand and grow a team, or whether you already run a team yourself, whatever context that means for you. But the evidence is there that there is a strong business case for looking after your mental health and well-being at work. So a focus that we're going to look at today is also how to prevent burnout. Something, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm very passionate about, that I have experience of overcoming, as well as my expertise in this field as a trainer. So the first thing that I want to explore with you all is the reality that our state has a direct impact on our mental, physical, and emotional health. As I mentioned to you before, we all have mental health. It's not like, some people have it and some people don't. We all have mental health. We all have physical, emotional, social, spiritual health. We all feel affected if we don't get enough sleep, if we're not eating well, if we're not exercising well. And actually, when that's all turned on its head and we sleep well, we exercise well, we eat well, we're looking after ourselves, we're going through, a good period in our lives, we can feel an emotional uplift, we feel physically lighter, more relaxed. But the true is the same with the opposite. If we're mentally struggling, we feel physically tense, achy, fatigued, emotionally troubled, and things can fluctuate, and we can feel less able to take care of our well-being. So we fluctuate in and out of different states all the time, from our sleepy getting up state in the morning to getting ready for the day, to getting to work, to mixing with people. We go in and out of different states of being, and our mental health plays such a big part in our overall state of well-being, because when our mental health is affected, it has a knock-on effect on those other aspects. So there's a term for what I'm talking about here in neuroscience called the mind-body connection. It's linked to evidence that has shown that the mind essentially has the power to either heal or hinder the body. Essentially, what we think affects how we feel and therefore how we behave. So our thoughts link to our physical responses, which link to our feelings. As our mental health operates on a scale of fluctuation, we can feel differently each day. Sometimes we might feel like we're going at a consistent level of a state of mental well-being that is optimal for us, that we're feeling well, or if we're not feeling in a great place, it can feel consistent, or we can fluctuate up and down. It really depends on the circumstances in our lives and what we're going through. But on that point around how our state affects our well-being, I'd like you to all think about a time when you felt stressed. Okay, now for the purpose of ensuring psychological safety, I'd really encourage you to not think about anything too troubling or too triggering, but just think about a slightly stressful event that you've been through, either perhaps something that's resolved now, so it's not still stressful, or something that maybe just niggled at you recently, where you're like, oh God, that's annoying. So something that happened where you just noticed those kind of responses happen in your body. What did you notice actually happened in your body? Physically, emotionally, any thoughts that went through your mind? So you don't have to share what it is, that the stressful event that you're thinking of, but if you can just share in the chat box, what is it basically that you noticed? Was there any sort of physical responses that were quite obvious and evident? Was there anything else that cropped up? I'll give you an example. For me, I noticed that my heart rate picks up. It picks up speed. I feel a little bit nervous. I feel flushed cheeks. My cheeks go a little bit hot. I might feel quite sweaty in my palms. Feel like, a bit of anxiousness coming on. So we've got Louise, shallow breathing. Absolutely, your breathing is naturally impacted. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. So George, tight chest, dizziness, shortness of breath, twitchy eyes. Absolutely. Jessica, heart palpitations. Yeah, I hear you. Shortness of breath. And Louise, tense shoulders. Yeah, absolutely. So you notice things feel tense. They feel more difficult to cope. Absolutely, like lightheadedness. The breathing is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because, if you imagine when you're feeling, I've got to get a lot done, and you're feeling stressed out, do you notice you sometimes go, I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, and then I've got to sort this. And it's almost like your breathing becomes really short, shallow bursts of breath, and you can feel really lightheaded as a result. Like George said, dizziness, with shortness of breath, that can come with that. But actually, it does have that instant impact, because your muscles naturally tighten up. They feel more tense. They feel more agitated when you're feeling stressed, because your body responds in that way. Remember I said about the mind-body connection. So thank you very much for those examples. Now I'd like you to all think about a time when you felt really happy and really positive. See what I did there? It's much better that way around, isn't it? So think about a time where you felt really content, where you felt grateful. Every time you think about that memory, you're just like, it's lovely. I could just sit in this for ages. Same question. What do you notice in your body? Just feel free to write in the chat box. So Jessica saying relaxed shoulders. So everything feels more relaxed. Absolutely. Your shoulders are relaxed. Anything else that you notice? For me, my breathing changes. Does your breathing change? Even if you think about like a holiday that you've been on, or where you've taken time off or had a break, do you notice? You might sit down and go, this is nice, right? You take full inhales of breath and slowly exhale, because you're starting to wind down, right? Or when you're just feeling really engaged and positive and happy about something, you take in naturally deeper inhales, because you're not holding on to the same kind of tension in your body. So do you see, again, the mind-body connection? If you're not holding to tension, tightness, or agitation, everything lets go. Like George is saying, full of energy. So yeah, you could be really energized, also relaxed, happy, can think clearly. That's a really interesting point, George, as well, because when we're feeling highly stressed, that will naturally over time start to affect our cognitive abilities, i.e. our ability to think clearly, logically, to make effective decisions, to be present and in the moment. All those cognitive skills actually become impaired when we're experiencing high levels of stress over a period of time. So actually, when we step back, when we take stock, we can notice that we think more clearly. We have the space to actually think clearly as well. So you also might notice your muscles are lighter, less tense. You feel generally lighter in yourself, more able to kind of take stock of things. So thank you very much again for your interaction there, and welcome to those who've just joined the session as well. So hopefully that has highlighted the point that I'm making here, how our state has a direct impact on our mental, physical, and emotional health. So what does this teach us? That, when we are feeling like our mental health is impacted in some way, when our stress levels are impacted, we have an opportunity to do something about it to help ourselves. Now, we're talking about a practice here long term, right? Everything that I'm sharing here with you today, I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's simple, far from it, but it's information that we can take on board and that we can use to our advantage to support ourselves moving forward and cultivate healthy practice, healthy habits on a regular basis as much as we can. So when we think of stress isn't just like, oh, some people experience stress and some people don't. Stress is a part of being human. There's a part of the brain where the stress response lives, which is called the amygdala. It's the fear center of the brain, but it's also a very primitive part of the brain because in nature, it's from an evolutionary perspective, the oldest part. So in nature, it wants to keep us safe and away from danger. That's what it cares about, right? So when we react to stressful events, that part of the brain that's firing off and signaling to us, this is stressful, this is threatening, I don't like this. It responds the same, whatever the kind of stressful event is, or however serious it is, if it's life-threatening or if it's a frustrating email that's come through your inbox or whatever it is, we respond with that stressful sensations, the signals in the body. And we fight, flight, or freeze. That's the kind of automatic mode of response that we go through. You may have heard of this before. So you either choose to face something head on, do something about it, take action, or walk away, retreat from the situation, pretend it's not happening, or just freeze on the spot and you don't know what to do, you feel stuck, right? So we need to navigate that because it's very easy to react to situations. That's the easy thing to do because that's our stress response, trying to keep us safe and protect ourselves. And we, reactiveness isn't always the most logical response. And sometimes we might later down the line reflect and think, oh, I wish I'd maybe handled that differently. That's a part of being human, right? But what we can think of is when we do notice those stress levels happen and rise, what can we do to down regulate that stress response? Because if we just allow stress to escalate at a high level over long periods of time that's unresolved, that can lead to higher fluctuations in mood, in anxiety levels, in feeling frustrated and anxious. It can start to affect our cognitive abilities, as I mentioned before. And eventually it can lead to burnout, where you feel mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. So we're not designed to be stressed out human beings. I want to make that really clear. It's not something for any of us to wear as a badge of honor. I'm feeling really stressed. I've got so much going on. I'm just really, really stressed all the time. Or if we notice people say, oh yeah, I'm really stressed, but everyone's stressed. So, I've just got to keep going. We need to be really careful that we don't just normalize high levels of stress, because that will inevitably lead to this journey that I've just shared with you here in different ways for different people. It can lead to health issues, chronic fatigue, chronic stress. And I'm about to share with you the 5 different stages of burnout. But we need to be really aware of that, okay? Because we need ebbs and flows. We need ups and downs. Yes, we experience stress. That's part of, being human. But we need to be conscious of the fact that we need to come out of stress states as well, okay? So we created this 5 stages of burnout model at Calmer, inspired by the Winona State University study on burnout. And there are these 5 main areas that we've identified are really critical in understanding how do you get to that 5th stage of burnout, right? So the first stage is the honeymoon phase. And this typically is around, the time when you're experiencing, say, the onset of a project. So if you look at your entrepreneurial journey as an example of this, right? When you've just started out, you're feeling excited, there's a big anticipation, you've got high job satisfaction because you're so passionate about what you're doing, you've got commitment, energy, creativity. You have free flowing creativity, right? It's just all happening and you're really excited. You might notice high productivity levels around this stage as well. So that's before we get into the onset of stress, which is the second stage. So this stage, once we've had a little bit of time where we've gotten into our project, we've gotten into what we're doing, we're fully engaged in our professional goals, we may start to notice stressors happening, right? In relation to responsibilities, navigating challenges, ups and downs, right? That's part of life and it's part of the business journey. So we may notice that our optimism is waning a little bit at this stage. We might find that there are common stress symptoms that start affecting you. Some of the symptoms we explored before together in that exercise. You might notice things like a lack of quality sleep as you'd usually get, perhaps, because you're, struggling to maybe switch off fully, or maybe it's sort of on and off. Some days are fine, and some days you notice it's kind of fluctuating. But you might notice a little bit of irritability, a bit of sort of those stress markers kind of manifesting. You notice they're there, but they're not like affecting you so much where it's on a really ongoing basis. But if it starts to escalate and you're noticing it more regularly, then this can lead to chronic stress. All right, so this is where you notice a marked change in your stress levels. The symptoms become a lot more intense at this stage. You might also actually even be missing deadlines, not tending to things in the same way that you usually would. You might notice physical issues cropping up a lot more regularly, a lot more tightness and tension and pain and fatigue, issues of stress levels, and sleep issues. You might notice you start to procrastinate as well on certain projects because it just feels too difficult to cope, and your motivation might be waning as well. You might also, from a social perspective, notice that you're withdrawing as well from family or friends or occasions and commitments to hang out with people because you feel so consumed by your work. And this escalating to a higher level can eventually lead to burnout. So this is where the symptoms become critical. It's where you notice that it feels increasingly difficult to cope. There is a development of a sort of escapist mentality. You can feel quite numb in what you're going through. You might notice that there are levels of anxiety or mood fluctuations that are sort of difficult to manage and cope with. You might notice self-doubt and isolation. You might notice more of a pessimistic outlook on your work. So what was once a real anticipation and excitement around your work, you're starting to feel actually, lack of motivation, more pessimistic. You feel that the physical symptoms are intensifying as well. And this can eventually lead to habitual burnout. So this is where significant ongoing mental, physical, emotional problems escalate into, more chronic symptoms, chronic fatigue. It could even lead to depression or other mental health concerns. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. We've got a blog on this that explores this in detail as well. So it's thisiskarma.com/blog/5-stations-of-burnout. So please do feel free to look into this in more detail should you wish. So just a little mantra that I'll share with you: stop, breathe, and trust. This is the mantra of our award-winning campaign that we have called the Reignite Project. So I really encourage you all to look into that as well. It's our 10-week free e-course that you can sign up to for free, which offers burnout prevention strategies. So you can just find that on our website, the Reignite Project. It's under what we offer. I really encourage you to take a look at that, to explore that in more detail and, sign up. It's free. It's our giving back. It's our way of giving back. So this is our mantra for that. Give yourself permission to stop, give yourself permission to breathe. Yes, we breathe every day, but how we breathe makes a big difference in terms of how we feel and how we behave, and actually consciously breathing, taking in deep breaths in and out, helps to not only expand your lung capacity, it can improve your respiratory system, it can sharpen your focus in the moment because it links to down regulating the stress response in the brain, and also it calms down your nervous system. So meditation practices, mindfulness practices, just give yourself the permission to take a step back from whatever you're doing if you're ever feeling like it's too much, because otherwise what's the alternative? We do need to give ourselves that opportunity to do so, to take stock and figure out what we need, if we need help from someone, if we need to find out help somewhere else, and trust our instincts, trust what it is that actually we need in that moment and not what we think we should be doing, because otherwise it can escalate into something more serious. So you all have a unique story. Really remember that and own that. Your story is unique to you, and this is also part of our Reignite Project campaign. So we've got a mini film that you can watch as well, and it outlines different entrepreneur stories of burnout and recovery as well. So they share their stories. What's your story? Own that. Really be true to that, and stay true to who you are and what your needs are as you grow your business. So I'd love to stay connected with you. You can find further inspiration, insights, and research on our blog. We've also got a podcast called the Positive Mental Health Podcast, and it's called Take Regular Breaks. And we're on social media at This Is Karma and at Tanya Diggory on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So all that's left to say is a big thank you to you all for joining today. And as I usually say, here's to your inner and outer success, not just what people see on the outside, but what's also going on the inside. So thank you, everyone.